Psalm 2 makes it very clear that leaders of the world have taken counsel against the Most High and His anointed. Therefore, the three major religions have collaborated in promoting second century writings by first century fictitious characters that they made up after the 15th century. So let's see who would partake in changing God's words and putting the future in the past. O God, the heathen are come into thy inheritance. Thy holy temple have they defiled. They have laid Jerusalem on heaps. The dead bodies of thy servants have they given to be meat unto the fowls of the heaven. The flesh of thy saints unto the beasts of the earth. Their blood have they shed like water round about Jerusalem, and there was none to bury them. We are become a reproach to our neighbors, a scorn and derision to them that round about us. How long, Lord, wilt thou be angry forever? Shall thy jealousy burn like fire? Pour out thy wrath upon the heathen that have not known thee, and upon the kingdoms that have not called upon thy name. For they have devoured Jacob and laid waste his dwelling place. And we all know that Zion is the dwelling place of Jacob. In other words, he's from Ethiopia. So it is written in Ge'ez, woe be unto thee, Babylon. Don't forget, they want you thinking that Jesus speaks Aramaic. In other words, they want you to think that Jesus speaks Babylonian. Woe be unto thee, Babylon and Asia. Woe be unto thee, Egypt and Syria. Now, if you see Asia, the king of Asia is part of the Greek kingdom, and Egypt is part of the Greek kingdom, and the king of Asia was married to the queen of Syria. In other words, Egypt, Asia, Syria, Babylon are connected with the heathens. So who are the heathens? As mentioned in the Ethiopian Bible. First book of Maccabean, also known as first book of Maccabees. And they left this out of the European versions. After Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came from the land of Kittim and defeated Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, he succeeded him as king. In other words, Alexander from Greece is now the king of Persia. He advanced to the ends of the earth with a very strong army and ruled over countries, nations. He fell sick and died and divided his kingdoms to his officers, who began to rule, each in his own place. They all put on crowns after his death. So they did it in Rome, which is part of the kingdom of the Greeks. They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the Gentile custom. They went to the land of Egypt and plundered the lands of Egypt after subduing it. So the Greek kingdom of heathens includes Egypt, Jerusalem, and Rome. And they also fortified the city of David with a strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. And they stationed there sinful people, lawless men. In Jerusalem, it became an ambush against the sanctuary and an evil adversary of Israel continually. But today they tell us the opposite. They want us to think that Jerusalem is holy. So the residents of Jerusalem fled, and she became a dwelling of the strangers. She became strange to her offspring, because that entire region from Egypt to India used to be called Ethiopia for dark-skinned people. But that's not the case today. So many, even from Israel, gladly adopted the pagan religion, so they sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, and he directed them to follow the customs which is strange to the land. In other words, the original Ethiopians were not doing this. So they should forget the law and change all the ordinances. So they tore to pieces and burned with fire. So the books of the law, they burned with fire, where the book of the covenant was found. And then they changed it into the book of covenants, or book of two testaments, when in fact it's called the book of testament or the book of the covenant. So if anybody had that one book, the king wanted him to be condemned to death. So as you can see, it's in the first book of Maccabean in the Ethiopian Bible, which is the first book of Maccabees in the Apocrypha, which they left out of the King James Version. So Alexander the Macedonian was first over Greece. He made many wars. He fell sick. He called his servants and parted his kingdom among them. So his kingdom includes Rome, which is part of the Greek kingdom. It includes Jerusalem and it includes Egypt. So the book of the covenant is called the book of the testament. And wheresoever was found with any of the book of the testament, the king commandment was to put him to death. In other words, the original Ethiopian Bible was not in the Old and New Testament format. That was made up in the 15th century during the Renaissance period. That's when they started rewriting, repainting, and changing everything from the past. In other words, they put the past in the future. So, no, they put the future in the past. So you are standing in the house of Jehovah in the courtyards of our God. Praise Jah, for Jehovah is good. Make melody to his name. So God, who is Jehovah, who is Jah, his name is Jacob. For Jah has chosen even Jacob for himself, Israel for his special property, because Jacob is Israel. And who is Jacob? Jacob begot Joseph, the husband of Mary. So in other words, Joseph is the son of God. Joseph is Christ. In other words, the heathens changed the story. So we know who the heathens are. So what would they go out their way to hide? The simple fact that Ethiopia is Ethiopian Bible the most complete. The Ethiopian Bible is the oldest and most complete Bible on earth. So they want you to not believe that. They want you to follow the heathen versions. That's like following this for years. So over 30 years ago, I used to tell people the sun, moon, and stars is inside of this planet, and they thought I was crazy. So let's watch what the heathens promoted. Pagans.
Sun is in space. Why is there light on Earth and no light in space?
Hello. In order for you to get light, you have to be in a room with light.
Today, with 5 decades better rockets and computers, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're really claiming, Danny, is that back in 1969, when all of NASA's computers combined had 1/1,000,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they sent astronauts ahead of schedule on the first attempt 1,000 times farther than they can do today with 50 years better technology.
That's the same concept. They claim discoveries from the 1st century, which was not written till after the 15th century. So it's like I found something, and because I drew it like a planet, so I drew a planet, and it's real because I attached the story to it. So that's what NASA does. They use art as their proof. So what did the heathens do? They basically created 1st century historians and gave them 2nd century writings, which were not discovered till after the 15th century.
So what they're actually saying is, for the first time in the history of the world, technology was greater in the past than in the future, which is impossible, which means they faked it.
They faked it. That's the same concept as this. Hello, wake up. You could clearly see that the sun is inside of this world and not outside of this world. Just like you could clearly see this. Ethiopia has the oldest Bible written in the 3rd century. So when was the Torah written? 700 years after. And when was the Talmud written? In 1483, which is basically over 1100 years after. So they're not first. So when was the Codex Sinaiticus, or whatever it is, discovered? It was discovered in 1844, and the Papyrus 49 was purchased in 1931. In other words, nobody mentioned or brought that up prior to those dates. It was never heard of until those dates. In other words, way after, just like the Quran. So the time of Muhammad's death, the Quran did not exist in a book form. So when was the first Quran printed? They said it was written. We just saw that when he died, it wasn't written. But they will lie. You get it? So they will say it was disseminated Quran in piecemeal and gradual manner from AD 610 to 632. But we all know when he died, there was no publication. There was no book. The first Quran was not printed till the 1500's. Just like the story of the earliest printed edition of the Surah, which is a biography of Prophet Muhammad. In other words, somebody claimed that they saw Muhammad, so they wrote a biography of him in the 800s, but it wasn't printed till 1,000 years after Surah. You understand? They're saying someone in the 8th century witnessed Muhammad and wrote about him, but they didn't print it till the 1800s. In other words, they keep lying on top of lies on top of lies. Follow God, not man.
They say attack them and destroy them in their straight places. Make the saints resemble trouble. Now the people are afraid of the ones who really love them. They go to the assassins to confess their sin.